Welcome to A Girl, a Guy, and a Buffy podcast, Small Bites edition. I'm your co-host, Kate Balzer.
And I'm Charles Swint. So our small bites episodes are discussions we had in the main episode that didn't quite fit the overall conversation, but we still wanted to share with you all.
We hope you enjoy these tasty conversational bites. We promise, no angry puppy scars from listening.
So, is Buffy the leader that we need?
I think so. Because no leader is meant to be perfect. So we should not expect perfection from Buffy. But she is a strong, caring leader who works for their team, who's open to, other people's ideas. For her, it's not about the recognition. It's not about, oh, we have to use only my ideas. And to me, those are signs of a good leader.
When Anya becomes a vengeance demon and she's like, I am the law and I need to do this. And when Xander's like, well, there's got to be another way. She's like, well, find me one. Like, if you can find me something better than this, then I will do it. But this is the choice that I have to make right now. So I have, there's nothing that I can do. And honestly, I think too, like her leadership style and how she leads is more indicative of how actual leaders lead. Like this whole idea that the Slayer and her Watcher are supposed to come up with the plan to save the world and do all this stuff seems insane to me. Like it's a crazy thing to do, especially for a 16-year-old girl and a 35-year-old man, just to have that conversation, as opposed to what Buffy does is basically building a cabinet of people like the secretary of Wicca and and the chief of douchery Xander, at least she can pull on those resources to do that, which is what actual leaders do. No one leads in a vacuum, and if they do, they're called a dictator.
Yeah, exactly. And kept getting touted for the US during when President Obama came to, won the election and first started building his cabinet. And he talked about how Lincoln, and so that came up a lot in the conversations and the articles. Lincoln did, he brought in people who disagreed with him into his cabinet or into his presidency. And when you think about it, Buffy does that too. Like, what is Spike but bringing in someone she disagrees with? And yet that helps, I think, make her a stronger leader because she's willing to listen to other side. She's willing to work across, quote unquote, the aisle, to, use political terms. And yet she's not a fool. Like if Spike didn't have the chip, I mean, granted, she worked with him and, she did have the truce with him with Angelus, but it was very time limited and they both got something out of it. So she knows how to build those momentary truces. But at the same time, it was like, you better get out of town or I'm going to kill you.
Right.
So it's not like she, necessarily worked with someone who wasn't a viable option. Like if Spike hadn't been willing to get something out of it, she probably wouldn't have made the truce with him because it wouldn't have helped her in the end anyway.
And how savvy is that for
a 17-year-old?
A 17-year-old to be like, yeah, let me this Geneva Convention style negotiation that's happening over here.
Yeah. She definitely has an innate sense of that kind of, collaborative leadership. I'd like to believe it's partly because even though we know very little about her life before coming to Sunnydale, that, maybe obviously she was involved in activities. Like we knew she was a figure skater and then she did cheerleading and, there were probably other things in there. So she did gain some, leadership skills by being involved in things. I'm going to guess she was probably the head cheerleader.
Right. Right.
And there is a leadership responsibility in that kind of role.
Yeah. I mean, and you have to work together on that. So that feels very innate, or the pyramid falls apart. If you're not really working together, literally that,
Right.
I mean, the flyer's going to fall.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why they're always saying kids should get involved in activities. There's more benefits to joining a club or a sport or a performing arts than just learning that skill.
Right.
Of the art or the sport or, whatever it is that you're doing. There's that social development, that leadership development. And so I think that pays off for Buffy, in addition to the fact that she has a natural leadership ability. And I think also that she's a problem solver. She's looking to just pull what she needs together to solve the problem. Like that is what her focus is.
Right. And she's an incredibly creative problem solver too. Like
Hmm.
she looks at
Yeah.
things from a different standpoint. And to go back to like what you were saying about her, like even her being, a cheerleader before and all of that stuff. And she said she was May Queen and did all of that
Hmm.
stuff. And a lot of that stuff does require you to, like, it requires you to be involved. It requires people to look at you
Hmm.
as a leader. And she was able to do that with the Scoobies. She was, she came in, was popular and all of this stuff, but at the same time, she was like, but here's really what's going on. And when you see how capable
Hmm.
she is, and you see that in action, then it makes it easier for you to be like, yeah, let's get on board with this.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's what Giles did too. He saw how capable she was and how resourceful she was initially and was like, oh, I need to treat this one differently.
Right. And we've talked about that before in previous episodes, but it's pretty awesome of Giles to have been that way and to have been open to that and not been a stereotypical stodgy, you know, watcher who just follows the council's teachings and thinks patriarchally and hierarchically. And that I think again that goes back to, I think we said this before as well, but that's the benefit of her not having been discovered by the council before she gets called. So she doesn't get that trained out of her, somewhat to the degree that we see that with like Kendra.
Yeah, because it makes her fighting more, more free flowing. Like her fighting
Right.
style is different from other people. And like when you look at how she fights versus how Kendra fights versus how
Hmm.
Faith fights, like it's
Right.
all very, you see
Right.
Buffy using a lot of like her environment around her and thinking on her feet like that, and making those decisions in real time.
Right. And yet at the same time, she's doing the training,
Right. Yeah.
she's doing that. You have to build those skills through training as well, but she can also improvise in the moment as needed.
Yeah. And I mean, she doesn't, and that's the other thing. And I can see where somebody could see it, but I don't think this is true about her. Like, sort of, she doesn't lord her power over anybody. It's not like
I
she's
agree.
like, I mean, she has said, I'm the Slayer, so I'm the one that has to do this, but it's not because I'm better than you,
Hmm.
therefore I have to do this. I have to do this because it is my sacred duty.
Responsibility.
That's my
Yeah.
responsibility, and this is the power that has been bestowed onto me. And
Yeah.
so that's the weight that I carry, as opposed to, well, you can't do it because you're not good enough to do it. And we see that with like, there's always that tension between Xander and Buffy in terms of that, and sort of
Hmm.
his like fragile ego
Yeah.
around that power structure. But when it comes to Glory and and other people, like Willow is the big gun. Like she's like, I know you are powerful. I know you are more powerful than me
Right.
when it comes to especially magic, but that also
Yeah.
makes you more powerful because that is something that I don't have the skill set to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think that is where one of the major conflicts comes in season 7 and why she seems like she may not be doing great as a leader, particularly as more and more potential show up and the realization of how big the threat is comes to be is that she starts to pull away from her team. And again, I don't necessarily blame her for that. Like from an outside perspective, I understand that they've been through a lot.
Right.
And she, we've talked about this before. She didn't really have the full amount of time she probably needed to process, everything she had gone through, all, coming back from being dead and then the sexual assault and, attempted sexual assault. So there's a lot that she
Yeah,
still is
absolutely.
emotionally weighing on her. And so I think, Buffy's natural defense mechanism is to pull inward. And as she feels like she's being more threatened by her friends, or the weight is being put on her more and more by her friends, and they're not sharing the burden like they had in the past.
Hmm.
I think that's where that conflict, where it feels like she might not be doing as well as the leader, but because she's not doing it in the way that works for her. And then that's where we see the change happen, at the end of the season and where she comes up with the idea to activate all the potentials.
Yeah, and I think too, like especially like early on in season 7, we see, I mean, we see them sort of separate. I mean, like we see Xander and and Buffy and Dawn working
Hmm.
as kind of like a family unit or
Right.
whatever, but those relationships have changed so
Hmm.
much. And so, Willow's, all feeling weird about what she did, trying to destroy the world and her magic use. And so she's not, I think a lot of that conflict too comes from the fact that Willow no longer feels like a viable leader. She
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
feel like the person who can step in and do the things that she used to do because she thinks she's dangerous now. And Xander is still, I think, a little bit, reeling from the breakup with Anya and all of that
Right.
stuff. And so I don't like I think he is so distracted too with his business and the construction stuff that he's doing that he's not necessarily there as a leader either. And then when all the potentials get there, there's just so many distractions that are happening
Hmm.
for them. Like, Anya's a vengeance demon, and so Xander's got his head kind of wrapped around there. Kennedy comes into the picture, and so that kind of like turns Willow's head a little bit too. So like no one's really like I can see why Buffy would pull away and sort of like she's like, I gotta focus
Right.
on this while y'all are dealing with your personal problems. And I think she gets frustrated. She's like, we don't have time for this.
Yeah.
We have like this is the biggest battle we have ever faced, and we potentially could all die. But you were too busy doing X, Y, and Z and screwing around with Kennedy and doing this and sleeping with Anya and trying to do all of this stuff. And even Giles says, "What are you all doing? Going on dates and doing all this stuff? There is a big bad, like somebody, we need to focus here." And I think Buffy gets chastised a little bit for being
Hmm.
too focused on the problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of it too is that she's not able to tap into that natural leadership style because she's has all these potentials being thrown at her and she's being told basically like you're responsible for protecting them instead of like let's bring them into the circle.
Hmm.
And yes, they obviously need to be trained, but like why is Buffy responsible for all of them and to like be their slayer and their watcher and their provider? Yeah, I mean, I think too much is put on her, and that's
Right.
also why she can't function like she normally does as a leader because so much is being thrown at her and it's throwing her off. And she in some ways, I think she probably can't think straight,
Yeah. Yeah.
understandably so.
And her cabinet isn't as strong as it used to be. So, like
Right.
the people that she would usually turn to for counsel have all gone through major
Right.
changes.
Nice.
And so and even Spike, she's like,
Right.
I need the guy who used to kill me. Like, that's the fighter that I need. You are not that person. Now you're all like, you know,
Yeah.
so I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's why, her style and who she is and her focus on the mission, yet not I mean, in season 7, yes, it's really is all about the mission, but again, you understand why. But really leading up to that, it's also about being a whole human being.
Hmm.
And obviously, we know that's what makes her last so long, like having those connections. Spike talks about that. And I really do think that makes a difference so that, that gives her the power to stand up to the Watchers Council and probably somewhat why she outlasts the Watchers Council.
Right.
She's really changing things. They've been stuck in their ways and like, they have this, the first evil coming after them. And yet I feel like in some ways they were probably still doing things the same old way. And so that is why like almost the entire organization got taken out.
I think too what you were saying about the council, like it's interesting too that I think that Buffy is also someone, and maybe not the first Slayer ever too, but we see her sort of understand the true nature of the Watchers
Mm,
Council and to really be like and put them on notice and to be
yeah.
like, actually, without me, you guys are nothing. Like you don't have like you're basically watching Masterpiece Theater is what you said. Like there's nothing that you can do with the information that you have, with what you do. I'm the only reason why you all have jobs. I give
Hmm.
you purpose. So I think like understanding that shift and that
Mhm.
power dynamic. I mean, I think that was a huge learning lesson for her, and I think like her understanding that really kind of brought her into a true leadership position.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think also, that her ability to adapt and grow as a Slayer and as a leader is also one of the reasons she lasts so long. I mean, granted, we've said this before, in spite of the two deaths, she's
Right.
still around. So, and maybe it's partly why she outlasts the council. I think that the fact that they tend to do things the same way, they continue with the traditions, and that they didn't consider, how their enemy might come after them and ends up taking out the whole organization. I mean, that's crazy.
Right.
Like to me, when they saw that their potentials were being killed and their watches were being killed and their various bases around the world were being threatened, like, why are you not taking the info and going? Or why is a team not going to Sunnydale to work with the
Right.
Slayer? Like, they're so caught up in their own power and their own thinking that, I think that's one of the reasons they're taken out, and yet Buffy still continues on, and then she ends up changing the whole system.
Yeah. And even Faith says that. She was like, "Oh, so there was
Mhm.
people out there killing us and nobody bothered to tell me?
Yeah.
What are you like what are you doing here?" This is a completely side questy question thought that
Mhm.
just came up in my
Okay.
head. That so when they find out that it's because they brought Buffy back the second time, which
Mhm.
allowed the first to attack, do they ever tell Buffy?
Nope, not as far as I know. I know that I don't feel like we ever get a scene after Giles. I could be wrong because I haven't watched that episode in a while
Hmm.
where they go to the Eye of Beljoxa, which is where Anya and Giles learn the truth. But I am like fairly certain we never hear them tell anyone else. And it's never
It's
discussed
never
after that.
discussed again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Granted, it might have been a distraction to Buffy, because then I'd be like real PO'd about that.
But I feel like, let's say that she didn't know that they decided to keep it from her because it wasn't going to change the situation.
Yeah,
I feel like if she had known that, she might have had a different reaction in empty places.
possibly.
I do think
Yeah,
that could have changed that because
actually, she would have, because then that would have given her ammunition and been like,
correct.
listen, if it weren't for all of you, I'm not going anywhere, because if it weren't for you all, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place.
Right. I'd be like turning to the potentials and be like, you want to blame someone for your situation?
Those,
Blame these three.
those three right there, that's on them.
Yeah.
That's on them.
Hmm.
Because the other one is dead.
Exactly. She paid the price, literally.
Right. She did.
Mhm.
Oh God, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
whole other discussion
Yeah.
of another time.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Buffy is an incredible leader. She makes mistakes, but all leaders do. And the
Sure.
point
Yeah.
is to recognize that, admit it, and then come back from it and keep going because you also learn a lot from failure
Yeah.
as much as you do from successes,
Yeah.
which I think Buffy does in general.
Agreed. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Bites. Let us know your thoughts about the episode by leaving a review or rating us wherever you listen to your podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Buffy Podcast and email us at abuffypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.